Hi, this is Mark Walker. Today I'm going to walk you through a common problem that companies run into trying to prepare for audit, or unfortunately, run into during an audit, or also sometimes comes up when implementing SOD or going through your first audit of SOD, segregation of duties. And what it relates to is providing a list of all the scripts in your account that execute as administrator. So today what we're going to do is explain why that list is required, how easy it is to generate it during Strongpoint, why it's not easy at all to generate it without Strongpoint, and and then what the process you go through in order to do the second step in the process, which is to explain to your auditors that the scripts you have that are running as administrator are not problematic or dangerous to your account. Okay, so first of all, we're trying to get to here, and here we've out of all the scripts in the account, I think there's a total of um, with me here. There's a total of 752 scripts in this account. There's 6 of them that we really need to think about. We'll talk about how we narrowed it down to 6 in a second. That just saved us a ton of time. But first of all, let's talk about the root of the problem. So the root of the problem is that when you deploy a script, there's a script record and there's a deployment record. And the deployment record controls the context in which the script executes. And it has a field on it called execute as role. And that can be set to a role, but the one that your auditors will be concerned about is the administrator role. Now, why do people do this? Well, when you're developing code, you want it not only to be compatible with all the roles you have right now, but you want it to be compatible with all the roles that will ever be created. So it doesn't break when somebody changes a new user role. And you also want to reduce the amount of retesting that's required. And the way that you do it, or the feature that NetSuite is deployed to enable you to do that, is to make your code execute as administrator. And this is very successful. Most, if not all, scripts that come in managed bundles are built this way because they don't know what your roles would be. It's very, very, very common that scripts would execute under this. And it's a good idea. It's a best practice. It lowers the testing and development costs for your company. However, the reason your auditors are concerned about it is that once you've given a role the ability to execute as administrator, then what that means is that it can do essentially anything in the system. And of course, in 99, 90, maybe even 100% of cases, in most accounts, it's not doing anything unreasonable. But what it could do is go around your segregation of duties rule. So imagine if you had a segregation of duties rule that says one person can do step 1 in a process, for example, approve a sales order, and another person does this next step in the process, create an invoice. Well, you could write a piece of code that basically that created an invoice automatically whenever somebody approved a sales order. And that would violate a segregation of duties rule because there would be no check in the process. The person who approved the sales order, in effect, also created the invoice. And so the auditors want to check for that situation because if that was happening, you would need some sort of specialized control. Possibly that might be a perfectly legitimate thing to do, but you want some sign off afterwards. Okay, so why do people have problems creating this this list of segregation of this list of scripts that execute as admin? Well, the main reason is that the information that you need to do that is not all in one place. So in NetSuite, you can have lists of script data, but you can't search your scripts in a way that either shows the bundles, which we're going to need to do to simplify our life and sort things out, and you can't see any deployment data from the script record. And then there's a list of deployments. And we see here there's 1,141 deployments. So obviously there's deployments for which there's no corresponding script, or there's multiple deployments for one script rather. And so, so unfortunately, while you can search deployments and see script information from the deployment, you can't easily, you can't see the bundle information at all, and you can't easily actually understand which scripts are executing as admin. There's no execute as admin field. In fact, if I go to do this, it actually becomes quite complicated. So if I go and try to create a search of scripts that are deployed, I can, where's my script deployment? Right here. And I can go and I can search. I can't search for anything that has execute as role set. It's simply not a field that I can search on. But what I can do is I can search the system notes fields to see if anybody's ever set it as that. Um, and I can say, yes, at the field. And the field that I'll be looking for is not documented. It's the run as role field. And unfortunately, for some reason, there are 15 of them, and they're not duplicates. So you would actually have to select all 15. And the concern I would have is, well, will they continue to be the same 15 over time? No, is there a possibility that change would occur and there's a new one that's introduced? But even if you do that, this will only show you things that ever have been set to administrator, not what's set to administrator now. And so this becomes very problematic and time consuming. And of course, the really big part is that in order to do this, even if you did this all successfully, I get rid of this for now, what you would have to do is you'd have to take the script data and the deployment data and the bundle data, put them in separate spreadsheets, do a lookup between them to identify which scripts in your account were in fact presently being used as by executing as admin, and also didn't come from managed bundles, because the auditors aren't that concerned about the managed bundles because they're not created by you. So nobody's really committing fraud through managed bundles. They're reviewed in the build for NetSuite process. Auditors are pretty comfortable that those aren't very high risk. So all that work will have to be repeated every time you review it, and that becomes problematic, right? By way of contrast, in Strongpoint, this is one simple search. Right? So we're going to dig into this search, look at it a little bit more, understand how this search works. Right? So in Strongpoint, we're famous for producing documentation that's really easy to visualize. The famous ERD diagrams, which show all the dependencies off a given customization. But Strongpoint actually builds a lot more documentation, and the reason it does it is to enable us to look at things in ways that would be ordinarily very difficult to do. So in this case, we're not actually searching the scripts themselves. We're searching the customization records created by Strongpoint, and because that's going to bring all the information together. And the first thing we've done is we've said, we want to only search for scripts. So we picked all the different types of scripts. I've even included client scripts. Client scripts cannot execute as admin. They only execute in the context of the user. But I've included them so that it's a complete listing for your auditors, so they don't need to know that. They can just say, okay, yes, you included client scripts. Okay, the next thing I've done is I've simply been able to select execute as admin. So I've said, I want to pick up any of the deployments that execute as admin. Remember we said you couldn't go from, there's no connection between the script and the deployment that's searchable in NetSuite. There is a connection between the script and the deployment that's searchable in Strongpoint. And so I can, and I don't have to go trying to figure out from system notes whether or not something is or was set as execute as admin. We know what's scheduled as execute as admin, and we just select it. So execute as admin is true. Okay. So this actually gets us the list. So this is the whole list super quickly. But now we're going to go beyond that, and we're going to start doing some of our project by doing a safe search. So the first thing we're going to exclude, and we're going to write down that we excluded this and share this with our auditors, we've excluded all the managed bundles and third-party bundles. So the difference between a managed bundle and a third-party bundle, they're both created and owned by third parties, SDN third parties, but in the managed bundle case, it's automatically pushed. And in the third-party bundle case, it is only pushed when you can refresh it, you can bring the bundle forward, but it's not pushed automatically. There's very few of these, but they do exist. DocuSign, for example, is one of them. And then we're also going to exclude the inactive scripts and the inactive deployments. And these are parts of the documentation that we don't need to look at right now. So if a script was removed or a deployment was removed, Strongpoint retains that because it's very important to retain the compliance information, and it may be important to understand something that goes on in the past. What changed, month X? Well, that script was turned off or removed, and so we will we'll capture those as inactive. But because they're not active scripts or deployments, we don't care about them. And then there's our data sources. So your auditors are only going to be concerned if if the data sources, meaning the fields that your script interacts with, gets data from, or writes data to, are in fact either a standard field, a standard record, or a body field, or a column field. So why would that be? Well, what they're concerned about is that you're going to use scripting to do something to create a record that is going to have some financial impact. And if you don't touch a standard field, and you don't touch a standard record, and you don't touch a body field or a column field, you really can't do anything that has financial records, because in NetSuite you can't script, you can't post directly to the GL. It always has to be through a transaction. So, what by filtering this out, we get all the noise out there. So we don't care about CRM fields. We don't care about custom fields on custom records for the most part. And if you do have that situation where you have a part of your financial system that's mediated through custom records or custom transactions, please speak to us. We can help you sort that out. And then we're going to exclude all the different types of records, or any data source off any field, off any record that's these, because nobody cares about your task records, right? And nobody cares about your campaign response records. That's just, they're important to your operations, but they're not important for this purpose. And when we do all that, instead of having 746 scripts we need to look at, which would take us forever, we can get ourselves down to 6. Right? Now, when you get down to 6, now you may not get down to 6. I don't want to oversell this. You may have quite a few to go through. And at this point, there's no alternative but to go through them. Hopefully, you've written a really good description, which is going to help you justify things. This only does this very simple thing. But you can see, even in our account, descriptions are often not there. Oh, goody, somebody actually wrote one. And if the description's not there, I would suggest that during this process, you put one in. You write one in. You can write it in actually at the script level. Strongpoint will pick it up and put it in the documentation. But we can still use it to sort through this pretty quickly. So remember, when we look at this, we're trying to figure out what we'd be concerned about. So what we're looking for is just what standard fields and what custom custom body fields or column fields are being touched. And when we see in the data sources that it's an empty field, that means it's a custom empty field. So you go through and CS plans, part of our custom assess process, and customer focus, that's what the customer's trying to achieve, and who's the executive sponsor, and all these different things. This is part of our renewal note-taking process, so it makes it easy for our customer success team to make notes, because they can fill in data, and the data gets consolidated into a note rather than a system note, so that it's much easier to read. So clearly this doesn't have any segregation of duties concerns, and we can go through and we can see, well, what was it concerned about, and say, well, it's concerned about the these standard fields, the different fields. These are obviously have the note record, the ID field, the note, the title. It's got these standard fields on the note record, but we'd excluded the note record. So is there anything that we would be particularly concerned about on the entity itself? And the answer essentially is no. So what Strongpoint will, in the search, we will still include fields if in fact there is, we're not excluding the record. So we have some standard fields on here, so that's data in, and we're touching records other than the task record here. We're clearly touching the customer record here. And so this is appropriate to review. So you review, you might write this down. Of course, you can export it to Excel, and you write down that we reviewed this, and all this does is create a note. And then the auditors don't care, right? And then you go on to the next one, and you say, okay, now this one appears to be relating to a journal entry, but we can see that the only body field that it touches is to read a journal entry template. This is a process that we're working on, actually, Strongpoint, to make it easier to validate journal entries, so you don't have to review them quite as much. So we've been working on it for a while. And so this is a piece of code that actually looks at a transaction, and then the only thing it's looking at in the transaction is this body field journal entry template. What it's clearly not doing is writing a journal entry, because if you were writing a journal entry, you would be seeing lots more information about filling in fields, etc., etc. As we move down, similar analysis. So as you can see, what you would normally need to do is go into the script, open it up, start reading the code, making sure that somebody really smart and skilled was doing this. You still need smart, but you don't need to be skilled at writing code. You can go through and understand where this is. And if you wanted to, if you weren't sure what anything was, of course, you can go into Strongpoint's documentation and look up each of these fields and make sure that you understood what they touched. What it's also showing you is whether or not any of these scripts have a library file that you might need to review. So there's a library file here that you might need to take a look at. And you certainly want to look at that, whether there's any workflows that are related. So you can see there's a workflow right here. And you can see whether this came from a managed bundle or not. Now, obviously, we've already excluded all the managed bundle objects, so there shouldn't be anything here. If you want to go to the actual script, there's a link right here. And then what we recommend in order to clear these is either singly or in groups that you create a change request for them and get approval to clear them. So somebody writes an explanation and then goes and gets approval. So if you're doing approvals right in Strongpoint, you can do this right now. If you're not doing approvals in Strongpoint, you can simply export the whole list to Excel or to CSV and then make your notes in there. And then, for example, attach it to a Jira ticket or a ServiceNow ticket to make it, to get it cleared. In any event, the point of the search is that you have eliminated 90% of the things that you need to review, making the whole process go much more simply. And this is part of the whole philosophy of Strongpoint. We're trying to make the things that you have to do to achieve compliance massively faster. And that's why companies often say that their preparation for audit is reduced by about 90%. It's because of the busy work around converting this plus this plus this plus this into one list, and then going through with your very best people analyzing those in order to figure out and justify what's there. Once you have this, by the way, you can then set this up as a based on change data to review it. You can put these execute as admin scripts that you're concerned about under special review, or you can actually use our agent product to just create a log and remind you for control purposes to review any new scripts or with deployments that are set to admin. So you don't have, so every quarter, you don't have to even do this part all over again. You can say, we just look at it differentially, and anything that wasn't on the list last time or the change that was on the list, we capture that and we go through and clear it. It's a little bit of an advanced use, but and again, we want to save you a ton of time on the first pass, which I think I've just shown you, and then we want to save you a ton of time every time you have to do it again. All right, so hope this was useful. It's part of a continuing series of showing people how you can do things. And by the way, you can do this search. It's not included, it's included in our compliance package, but you can still build this search in our free Flashlight product. So if you don't have Flashlight, there's really no excuse for doing this manually anymore. If you don't have Flashlight, you just get Flashlight, go on our site, sign up, it's free for the first user, get Flashlight, and then you can follow the instructions. I'll be putting out a blog post about this, and it'll have the actual instructions in it. And of course, you saw the criteria right there. All right, thanks very much. Have a great day.